We are now live.
And we are.
So let me make sure it is in the page, refreshing the page. I see it live now, nice, and in the group. Okay, great. So let me just mark as announcement, refresh the page again, and then pin posted. Facebook keeps me busy, you know. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so much to share, right? So many places to share.
Yeah, but I mean, like also the way they do things, you know, it's like certain things I think should be a one-step process or like a two-step process. Yeah. Okay, great. So we are now live with satisfying skin color in Photoshop with Daniel Hager. So let me pop that away. How you doing, Daniel?
Now I'm pouring myself a drink in that second. So hi everyone.
Let's see, we got comments coming in already. We got Andrew Nichols
already.
House again from the UK. Thanks for being here, Andrew. So yes, everyone let us know where you are watching from. Comment.
Yeah, that would be great knowing. So if people don't know me, I'm from Germany. So on my side, it's already kind of late, but I'm still hoping to make it through this. But yeah, interesting to know where everyone is.
Time now? 9 or 10?
Pardon?
Is it 9 or 10?
10.
10,
Yeah, 10.
Hi, Daniel. It's
from unknown Facebook user.
Moderator.
Okay.
Hello. Yeah. And Andrew's saying hello too. Andrew Nichols from the UK. Hi, Daniel.
Hi. So he's actually an hour after me. So he is at 9. But hey to the UK.
Yeah, I think it's probably 9 p.m. for him, right? 9 p.m. for him, 10 p.m. for you.
Yes.
Okay, we got 40 people already watching. That's good. Christy's here. How you doing, Christy?
Good. Hi. Hi, Christy. And
sharing this to Christy. I know as Christy shared it. Thank you.
Great.
Andrew says yes, 9 in the UK. And let's see who this is. Nancy. Nancy says from St. Louis. Hello. Mohammed says hello. How are you? Where are you from? We always have quite the international group. I love that about the group.
Yeah. It's always exciting meeting new people all over the world. And that's the exciting thing about the internet, isn't it? So to connect with people and getting to know different culture and interacting with people.
Absolutely. And there's different cultural differences even with images, which I like a lot. So
yeah, it is.
Some people don't get
which can be confusing to many people, but
Carla's in Las Vegas. Thanks for attending. Yeah. Carla says hello. Good. It's building up nicely. 56 people. Let us know. Anybody else?
Good.
Maybe we'll get started soon. Yeah. Don't be Tennessee. Let's see who that is. Michelle from Tennessee.
All right. So maybe a good reminder for people who are on Facebook and want to comment. You have to give StreamYard permission.
Correct.
So we see the names. Otherwise, we just have an unknown user. But it's much more fun to know who you are and interact with you directly.
That's Henry from the Netherlands. So before we begin, speaking of StreamYard, let me do a little shout out. So yes, live with StreamYard. StreamYard, the multi-streaming app. So you can stream on, say, a Facebook page, a Facebook group. You can now stream to LinkedIn, YouTube, and I think they're working on other ones, maybe Twitch that might be interconnected with, but StreamYard was the best app that I could find for this type of streaming, good for interviews, good for portfolio reviews, good for live tutorials like this today. So thank you, StreamYard. And let's see, I think at this time, let's see, we got Yeah, Christy's from Virginia. Mohammed is from Bangladesh.
Okay.
Aftab is from New York City. Let's see, someone is from
London,
back in
England.
This is Sarah. Sarah,
Oh,
thank you for being here. What's that? That sounds like
my cat just came in. Sorry.
cheering you on. The cat's cheering you on. Nice. Buzz from Baltimore. Thanks for being here, Buzz. Okay, so shall we let you and Katrin?
Oh, someone from Germany. Hi.
Katrin, she does great work too, as well. Katrin, so great artist. Okay, shall we let you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm also going to introduce my cat, or she's going to introduce herself. She has quite a reputation of jumping into streams and podcast recordings. So I hope we can make this through without her being annoying. So hey everyone, my name is Daniel. I run a retouching agency, boutiqueretouching.com, or a studio, more to say. We operate out of Germany, but we have international clients. We have also done a lot of covers for Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and all that stuff. So, and in terms of my background, I've not always been working in this field. So, in my former life, so to speak, I have worked through, as a tech for in the printing industry. So I have worked with brands like Canon, Epson, Konica Minolta, and Kyocera most recently. So I have been on the technical side of printing and color management. So I was the one when an agency has issues with their printers, their copy machines, or their color management, technical support is called in to solve the issues. And that was my side, and that's where I learned a lot about workflows, color management workflows, and the technical ins and outs. And that kind of carried over to my retouching career, always having a technical approach to things, understanding things. And today we will be talking about some theory on color, how you can break down color, different color modes or ways of thinking about color, and how that translates into application to your images, how to find issues in your images and how to actually, solve them in different ways, and how a breakdown can make life easier for you in Photoshop. So it's not necessarily going to be Lightroom, but we will be only in Photoshop today. So yeah, but it would be interesting to know where people at. So maybe some people can comment if they are more experienced, less experienced with color, if they have a certain issue that they still haven't got around fixing for themselves, or they are stuck with something. So if they can put that in a comment, we might be able to address that today as well.
Okay. And then just a little quick shout out. We have David Mathis, one of my top admins, one of my best admins from Texas. And we have greetings from South Africa.
Oh, hey.
Scroll down and see if I can find that. Can't see who that is it only showed you so much at the thread.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. And we also have Linda from Texas. So Texas is in the house today. So great. So do you want to share your screen and jump into Photoshop itself?
Yeah, just let me get rid of that window. I think we can jump over to Photoshop, and
there we are. And I'll take you full screen, yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great.
So we are in an empty Photoshop, and I will start by talking about color theory, just briefly. So this is something that most people are familiar with. So they know we have an RGB color model and an CMYK color model. But also, which is interesting, are the terms of shades, tints, and tones that might pop up in different places or different conversations. But ultimately, we are always working with color in some way. We are shifting color around in Photoshop or Lightroom when we are processing images. So we have to kind of understand how our tools work and what they are doing. Obviously, something more complex will be color relationships, so like split complementary colors and that stuff. And then the main thing for people to take away on this is there are different ways of describing color and different ways how to describe color relationships. So for example, if I show this one, this is what artists use. So they usually start with the primary colors, red, blue, and green, and mix them together. So in their model, red and green will be complete complementary colors, but that's only in this one model. For example, if I go back to the other one, you will see that red and green in terms of the primaries are complementary, but we have other color models where this is not the case. Or for example, if I go to color balance, you will see that red and cyan also in RGB color model will be complementary and not red and green. So that's a matter of different color models that we can work in. So another important model that you don't necessarily have to know, but should know about is the LAB color model. The LAB color model is more like a technical construct. So it determines all the colors we possibly know. It also contains them. And it's a very technical and precise way of describing color. That said, all our applications are kind of using this color model to accurately describe color. So that's actually what happens behind Photoshop when you manipulate colors and moving from one color space to another. So for example, if you are moving from sRGB to Adobe RGB or vice versa, then LAB is used to match the values. So you still end up with the same colors. And it's very hard, as you can see. We have basically three axes. So we have an A axis, and B axis, and an L axis. So it's very hard to describe for us as humans when we want one color or we want to shift the color around, how much more towards the B plus or B minus some color has to go. So it's really hard to communicate this way and also think this way. So that's why we have different models. So for example, we have the HSV, which stands for hue, saturation, and value. And value is basically the same as a channel. So in Photoshop, we have on the channels tab, we have red, green, and blue. And these are the channels of the RGB diodes we also have in display devices. So those are based on the HSV model. And it's basically just saying like red will be 100% value or brightness of that one channel, right? But it's still hard for us to think as humans, because when you're getting into the middle, which is more or less saturated, you have to balance all these three channels against each other. So that's also why a lot of people have issues with channels, because it's easy to work with one channel, but it's not easy to work with three channels simultaneously. And that's where this other model, which is kind of similar, comes into play, and it's also called similarly. So we are working with hue, saturation, and lightness. And that determines, so the difference is when we go up, we also lose saturation. And when we go down from 100%, we also lose saturation. And that's how a lot of our tools behave. So for example, if we are using curves and lighten, we also add saturation because it's keeping the reference to the outside. And if we go up, we also lose saturation at some point again. So that's interesting. But this is the one color model. Let me show another way of how its application might be interesting to you. So let's, for example, look at this and say we are here at half the lightness, and here we are on half the value. So here you can see at half the value we have kind of desaturated colors, whereas here the saturation is not affected by the lightness. Hey kid. Okay, so but what you can take away of this is we can break down images and color into these components because we as humans understand them separately very well. So we can use hue, for example, and have it mapped this way, and we understand, okay, there are different angles, and if I move a slider, I can move the slider across and change the colors. That is easy, and we also can change lightness in one direction, and we can change saturation from 0 to 100. And it's a very easy way to separate color and understand color. So now how does this translate to images? We can break down every image in these three components and fix them separately from each other. So many people are always trying to fix everything in one step, what we don't need to. So we will now go into another image, and I will show you how to separate hue, saturation, and lightness in Photoshop and how that works. But before we do that, maybe we are going to have a look at the comments and see if people can follow for what I was talking about.
Yeah, there's no question yet. Just
Okay.
someone wrote, "I love these charts," so that's good.
Good. Yeah. Good. I mean, this is more of the technical thing, but I wanted to give a brief introduction how things in theory work. You don't have to memorize that, but it's just my way of saying there are different ways of describing color and different ways of communicating changes. And also not every tool in Photoshop is working the same way. So I have a few images here that we can go through, and they're all unretouched for now. So nothing has been touched up. So they're straight out of camera, pretty much no raw processing done. And let's start by running this action. So I've made an action which does make my life easier. And basically what it does is to separate all the components of color. So we have one that is just showing luminosity. We have one that is only showing saturation. And we have one that is only showing hue, mainly focused on skin colors. So it's very hard to figure out other colors, but in terms of retouching and skin retouching, it's very interesting to have this and see very subtle differences in.
I didn't know that it was purple.
Pardon?
I didn't know our skin was purple.
Yeah, it is, but it's just covered with something else. But yeah, I mean, this could be any color. It's just a matter of how I set up these curves, and yeah, but it's not necessarily what people should take away of this. So if people are interested in getting these, we have a small download on our website, also where you can download the action with a small course on how to best use them. But I will show this in this video as well. So when we are retouching, we have different issues to address, and most people already know about dodging and burning, which mainly or actually is supposed to fix luminosity issues. And what's really helpful is to have a conversion that shows us only luminosities. And as I said, there are different ways of going over a conversion and also talking about color. So there are different ways of creating a black and white conversion as well. So let's, for example, use the black and white and also use, which was it? The channel mixer, which also has a monochromatic mode. So for example, if I now go with the channel mixer and set it to monochrome, obviously we end up with a black and white image. But if I switch on the black and white underneath it, you see that we have some shifts, right? I hope that translates to the stream.
Yep, looks good.
And also, if I use mine, especially in the reds, you will see it in the dress, this conversion. So there are different ways of changing the values in black and white. Obviously, if I go with the channel mixer and change these values of the channels, then I can manipulate how they translate. And that's not very effective in terms of dodging and burning, because if you don't have the perceived luminance values in that conversion, how bright or how light we perceive certain colors, then you will be dodging something or burning something that isn't there in the image. So that's why I urge people to use maybe a gray layer and set it to color, and this is giving us a perceived color or lightness representation of all the colors. For example, this red is very kind of still dark, but some has some bright spots. So that translates very well how we see the image in color. So that's important. And then we can look at saturation. So many people haven't seen an image in only saturation, but what this does is taking saturation values and maps it out from black, which has no color or no saturation, to white, which is very saturated. And when we look at what is bright and what is dark, you will also see these dark spots in the face, which means it does not account for brightness. It only converts saturation. So the brighter we get in the highlights, the more neutral the color gets, and the more or the less saturation it will have. So that also reflects in this view, but we will see different issues like the eye bags. They will show up dark because they have less saturation in it. So if we look at this, it has very much less saturation as the dark spot underneath, right? So we have different issues here to target. We have, for once, the brightness that we have to take care of to get rid of this, and we have to fix saturation, which is this little bright spot and then this dark spot and this bright spot here. So that's how we can determine what changes we will have to make. And the same goes for hue. So if I switch on the hue and we look at the same area, we will see we have some more redness in the highlights and some more redness underneath the eyes, and the dark spot of her eye bags is a little bit more yellow. So that's the overall thing, is how to break down and how to look for issues. I will go over more issues and talk about what is common in pretty much every image and what we are fixing in pretty much every image, and how these help layers can help you to find this. So let's look at some comments. So if you don't understand anything, I can go in more detail, less detail with everything, basically. So it would be super amazing if people were to comment.
Well, Lisa
Someone's, yeah, go on.
Carney, who is also a retoucher. She does entertainment, like a lot of movie poster work. She says, this is a complicated process, but amazing. Stick with him on this. It's a fantastic way of understanding color and tone. Thanks, Lisa, for being here.
Obviously, it's complicated for everyone who has never thought this way. So it's something new to approach. But you will find very much the same issues in every image. And you also can use these help layers as a learning tool. So once you have deconstructed color in different images, you will find the same issues again and again, and you will see them even without these help layers. More comments? No, not much. Okay, so yeah.
You're good.
You want to say something?
No, you're good.
Or should I go on?
Okay,
so let's look at another area that is mostly overlooked. So let's consider this as a portrait, many people are or will be focusing on skin, but might not be focusing on hair. So let's look at the area of hair here and see what we can find in terms of issues. So if we go into luminosity, we will mainly think this is fine and we don't need to fix something. But then when I switch to saturation, we will see we have some areas that have very much saturation and others that have very little saturation. And we might even want to even that out. And the same with hue. So the hue is pretty much similar. We have some more redness down here. And when we switch back, what we can confirm is some areas like these, they have more saturation and around down here. And in the back, not so much. I will go to another image that showcases what happens here much better, which is this one. And we have a lady in red pullover, and we will use the same technique. So what happens with the hair in the other image is a lot of color bounce, and we saw that saturation and hue issues might appear on this side of the hair, but not so much on the back side. And that is influenced by color bouncing or light bouncing onto the dress and off the dress into the rest of the hair. So that might influence how or what we will have to fix in an image. Let's go to the other image again. So here we have the same issues. Obviously, the light has to hit all the reds in here, and it will reflect into her face. And it's something that many people don't account for when they retouch portraits. So let me switch to the saturation view. And we will see, obviously, the red is going to be super saturated, but also in terms of her skin, we have some areas that have very much saturation compared to the rest of the skin. So let me add an empty layer and I will make some notes here. So, no double click. Come on. Oh, okay. So.
Everything good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, so everyone who does photography knows light is exponentially tapering down over distance, and that also goes for color bounce. So if the light is hitting the color here, this area is going to be heavily affected, whereas areas that are further away might not. But as you look at this, you see that here we have this band of color bounce that we might take care of. And it's also taking up very much of the red, especially in the dark areas. So when people think about color bounce, the darker an area is and the less light it gets directly, the more it will be affected by other light sources. So that goes for this area. And we have found that there's a lot of saturation and a lot of redness going on. So how can we fix this? For example, there are numerous ways how we can take down saturation. For example, with the hue saturation, let me switch this on. We can then take the hue and saturation down. Let's put it underneath. Oh, where is it? Not here. Okay. So we can take this down, then invert it, and then slowly paint it in. I will do that very sloppily now, just for people to get the idea. Obviously, we have to paint white. And as you see, I can take the saturation down in this area and also fix this. So the technique basically when painting on a mask is the same as with dodging and burning. And that's why I always say People have to learn dodging and burning and master this technique because it also applies in these scenarios. So as you see, I can take down the saturation on this, and we can look at the effect that it has on the original image. So that has taken care of quite some issues that we had, but still we have this redness in the skin. So that's where we might want to switch to the other view. And then there are multiple ways to figure this out as well. So for example, you could use curves. You could use color balance. You could use, I don't know, a filter. You could use an empty layer and paint color over it. You can also use hue saturation and shift the color, right? So we can make it more towards the yellow and then paint that in. I'm just very briefly doing this as well, just so people get the idea of what's happening. Okay, that's way too much. Okay, I'm very sloppy, but anyways. So that's how we could fix this. So now let's look at the image again and switch on and off the redness correction and the hue correction, right? So that has taken care of a lot of this area, but we still have to obviously look at the brightness, and there you will be seeing that we have some inconsistencies. We might brighten up the shadow and stuff, but that's what people usually or what they already know is how to brighten and how to darken. So let's look at other areas that might be affected, because I told people I will talk about areas that will always be affected and always have the same issues. And it's very important to know these, which will speed up your workflow, which will make you focus on the main issues compared to other issues that might take much more time. So it's very efficient to look at these issues. So let's look at color again. Again, we have addressed this, but then every image will have the same things. So I have to switch this up again. So we always will have saturation issues in the ears. So we have very much inconsistencies, which will also be a matter of saturation and redness going on. We will have desaturated eye bags always. So we have to put color into it. It doesn't help to just brighten these areas. We also have to introduce the correct color into them and the correct saturation in that. Then sometimes with the lips, we have a very saturated line at the edges. That happens a lot. Then these, where the skin folds, we have more redness and more saturation going on here. And also the tip of the fingers and these edges, they always have saturation issues and redness issues. So let's switch over to the color, where you can see the same thing for some areas. So we have more or a lot of redness in this case in the hand that we might want to fix. Also in terms of the knuckles, sometimes have issues. And as I said, the ears, they have redness issues. Now let's look at the other images and see how that translates. So I'm running an action. For people who don't know, you can actually use one of the F2, F3 or whatever as a shortcut to run an action, which is what I usually do. So let's look at saturation issues here and use another layer outside of the group. Okay. So we have, sorry. So we have saturation issues again, pretty much everywhere where we have edges along the ear, then the fingers, especially on the edges and on the tip here, we have saturation issues. Here we have saturation issues. All of these areas where the, yeah, where we have a lot of blood in our skin, especially, or very thin skin. Then again, we have this little furrow which has more saturation. The ibex have less saturation, and then we have very much inconsistency throughout, the eyes and also around the hairline. We have the same issue of having too much saturation. Then let's look at this image. Put another layer on top. And again, here we have, sorry, I'm zooming in more so people can see. Then again, we have here some areas of high saturation around the fingers. Also very little saturation right next to it. Then we have this area which has little saturation here. The ibex has very little saturation. Hairline, we don't see much of it now. And around the lips, we have this brightness area which has very little saturation, but then it transitions to an area of, we have this little band of high saturation, but then it translates into very little saturation. So these are areas that we might want to focus on, but that's only been saturation. So let's look at the hue and what we can find there. Sorry, the wrong layer. This one. So let's look at saturation. At color. Again, in this representation, the darker it gets, the more red it will be, and the brighter purple it will be, the more towards the yellow it will lean. So even here, I have to change the color for now. So here we will have issues of redness, which will be in the finger. So not only is it saturation, but also color inconsistencies. We have some dark spots around the skin here. Also the ibex are a little bit more red, and around the nose we have redness going on that we might even out. In the other image, let's remove this and let's look at hue in this image. We will pretty much face the same issues as of I should take another color, maybe. Let's take green. So we have redness in the fingers, in the knuckles, around some edges, especially this area always has some redness, which you don't want to get rid of all the way, by the way, but you just want to even things out, as with dodging and burning. Take out some red spots. Like, for example, this area has some red spots, and you would only take them down and make them even and blend in with the rest of the skin. And let's look at this image in hue. Oh, we already did. Sorry. So yeah, that's a process, and the technique basically is the same. You would use certain tools, curves, whatever you feel comfortable with, and work on the masks and address these issues manually. And it's very easy. Once these steps are split up, you have a workflow that is starting with dodging and burning, and after that, what people are typically doing is then going to fix the color issues that persist. So let's look at the comments for a moment so I can have a drink.
Yeah, just John says thanks. Any questions, everyone? Let us know.
Yeah, if people have questions, that would be easier to address them now.
I have one question, which is,
go on.
Seems like, this kind of breakdown process, follows kind of like the temperature of a person. And so different darkness and different areas that you say are kind of like a warmer area. Could you also use this on something that has basically like a neutral temperature, such as like a landscape?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
It just
The
down the same kind of color due to temperature, because it'd all be kind of like the same color, but it would break it down otherwise, right?
Yeah. So the only thing you might want to change or might not be super helpful is this hue, because it like this hue is very much targeted to detect uh, the areas of orange to red, but then it's set up with different curves, and you could change these values, which will change how the color will be, which you are seeing. So that can be helpful to find inconsistencies in nature as well. But then it depends on what you want to get rid of. So in a landscape, you always have some sort of color bounce as well. You might want that, you might not want that. It really depends on the content of the image and what you want to do with it. But it might be helpful to if you have a set of images to compare these and see where your colors are falling and see if you have worked consistently, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I want to show something else, which I showed how to use the help layers, and obviously it's always going to be some sort of a manual process to target likeness issues, saturation issues, and hue saturation issues. And for that reason, I came up with a way to have one step taken care of in a semi-automatic way. But I needed to introduce you to these help layers, and so we can have a look at what it actually does. It's very subtle for most people, but people who are working on portraits and now have seen that we have these maybe saturation shifts or saturation issues in every image, they will probably appreciate what it does. So I have created a script which, let's run it, which I call satisfied because it will
There,
do
there,
saturation.
there is
Pardon?
a comment though before.
Oh, okay.
Just David, who's also my top admin, says, very technical but helpful. I find HSL to be an easier approach and curious about how channel mixers work. Thanks, David.
Yeah, channel mixer, basically using HSB or channel brightness. But I also find that HSL is our way, hue, saturation, and luminosity to break images down and understand colors. Because for us, it's easier to speak in color and say, okay, make this lighter, but don't have the saturation change, but don't have the hue change, or target just a specific field of saturation or something. So it's very easy for us to communicate and to think this way. And therefore, many of us break down the changes we make in Photoshop into these steps of targeting luminosity, then saturation, and then hue. And yeah, so I agree on that. It's very much easier for us to approach images and think this way. So maybe I will run this now again as we were introduced to this question. So I have created this script, which is called satisfy. And let's run this for a second. And what it will do is to create a mask or which has the saturation levels mapped down. And then it will have a vibrance and saturation applied to it and taking down vibrance. So to understand what it will do to the image, we also have to look at what the saturation looks. So not to be confused, if I alt-click to the mask, it will show the mask itself. Whereas if I go to the image and activate the saturation, we will have a similar view, but we will not be on the mask. So now we have the help layer introduced. And if I switch on and off this layer that the script has created, we will see how it affects the image. And you will see that some of the saturation has been taken down. So the idea of this is to target the areas of very much high saturation throughout the image and reduce them to an appropriate level. To make this more work, we have to go onto the mask and maybe use a levels adjustment to separate these areas of high saturation, which makes it much more apparent what we will be targeting, because we will not try to target the regular skin tones. We only want to separate out the areas of high saturation. So that's what we will be doing here. So I will bump this in again and have it separated out like this. So, and if I now go back to the regular view and switch this on and off, you see that we have these areas of very high saturation, and we pretty much fix everything. The only issue we have is the dress, because that is bright red and we don't necessarily want to have that affected here. So, but that's just a matter of going into the mask and masking things out. So if we don't want that here, we can mask the dress out, and or just mask it in, which might be the better way, is to put this in a group and put a black mask on it and mask it in where we want it. And you could use the help layer to... Have I put it in there? No, I haven't. You can use the help layer to visualize what's going to happen. So let's just put some white in there. Oh, I'm on the wrong layer. So, and then I could just paint this in the areas that we saw affected. Right? And we had some issues down here, so that's we can do relatively sloppily. And also it will take care of some of the issues in here. And now let's look at this again in color. And let's zoom in and see what it has done. So it's very subtle, but it only takes care of these, again, these areas of high saturation. Especially on top of here where we have fixed a lot. So we have put a lot of our mask up here. So I hope people can see it. It's very subtle, but it's also, if you were to go overboard and you were to target too much of the natural skin tone, the skin would look gray and washed out. I will also demonstrate it on maybe this image, where we have a lot of... Yeah, let's look at what happens here. So let's run the script again and use that. And put that underneath the help layers. We don't need. Okay, so now let's switch this on and off. Oh, it didn't. Oh, and maybe have to. Okay, make this a regular layer. Okay, that worked. So now you see that we have a lot of the regular skin color affected, which we don't want, but it's a good starting point. We already have the mask that maps out the saturation. And you see we have a lot of the regular skin tone affected, but we only want these very bright spots. So you could, again, on the mask itself, run levels and increase the contrast and map out the areas of high saturation. So we increase contrast and introduce black to the areas that you don't want to be affected. And now you also clearly see these around these edges and where it's very prominent, where we have a lot of saturation compared to the rest. So let's look at the image again. And you see all the redness is pretty much gone. We could even go a little bit further on the mask. No, that's not what I wanted. Let's use levels again. and make it like such. So now you see here the redness around the nose. It's all gone. Except for what we don't want is the lips. So we can address this now in different ways. We can say, okay, it might have been a little bit too much, so we can change the value here until, again, on the nose, it's where we find it appropriate. We can also use the help layer to visualize what is a good value. So we can take this down to maybe maybe 20 or something. Okay, and then we mask out the lips. Maybe just 50%. Sorry. So again, let's look at the whole thing. What you see where the finger is touching, if I switch this on, it's getting rid of the saturation issues in this area, around the eyes. It's fixing pretty much the saturation. But the neat thing about is if I stay on my help layer, if you look at, for example, the eye, if I switch this on and off, you will see it will blend in with the natural saturation levels of the surrounding area. So it's not making it like gray or taking the saturation down too much. And that's very helpful and will very much speed up your workflow, because we have done just this sloppy masking just to fix most of the saturation issues throughout the entire image. And that will drastically speed up your workflow, speed up how fast you can manage to turn around images and all of that. And yeah, that's pretty much what the script does and what I use on pretty much every image now, because it's speeding up my workflow so much.
Great.
So let's see if people have some comments as well.
Let's hear. Osvaldo says, great stuff.
Okay.
And I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing this one, but maybe it's Olalade. Olalade says, job well done, guys. Yeah.
Okay.
I think
it would be interesting to know if people understand this process and how much it can help people to speed up this process of fixing saturation issues, because you run the script, run levels on a mask, and except for very sloppy masking, you're pretty much done with fixing saturation issues on an image.
The exact link you can put in the private chat. You could type in the exact link, and then I'll
sure
for it. But just in general, is it part of your boutique retouching?
So we have the script itself. We have that on the website. I'm not sure how much. So it costs a few bucks, but it's mainly because we put a tutorial with it. I will put the link in the description where people can find that. Give me a second.
Copy that.
Yeah, give me a second. So yeah, if people have issues with color, so if you put a comment in the or under the image or wherever you are under the video, not the image, we can maybe address your issues and see how we can help you in this live stream where I look at my link.
Also, just to let people know that Daniel runs a Let's Talk Retouching podcast, which is on Apple Podcasts. I will go back and post these links in the event page so people have that. Let's Talk Retouching podcast on Apple Podcasts. podcast.apple.com/us/podcast Let's Talk Retouching /ID 14094755509. Bit of a lot to say there.
And then, I'm not sure if you need the ID, but it's Apple. You never know.
And then also, Let's Talk Retouching podcast is on Stitcher. So .com podcasts world retouch.
Retouching. Yeah, it's on pretty much every podcasting platform. So it's on Stitcher, iHeartRadio, I think.
Okay, and then
Spotify, obviously.
right, and then for this is where you go to download the scripts, right?
Yeah, should we set up a coupon code? Maybe I can do that at the moment. Let's set up a coupon because people who have watched the video, they should get something out of it, except for all the knowledge.
I'll copy that and put it together for the event page and stuff.
Yeah.
This is a nice approach. Abba from Maryland, I think. Yeah. Let's go back to I have a discount coupon or something, a code.
Oh yeah, I'm putting it up. So let's call it PAP Live for the Photoshop and photography live that we are doing, and make it a nice 10% off for people who are watching. Yeah, we will also put it in the comments, I guess. But yeah, that's set up. So yeah, I would like to know if people understood what we were doing, because obviously it's much more advanced than going into Lightroom and just processing an image.
And give me the code now so I can have that for the record. Yeah. Then in the private chat, and I'll add that link for the
live.
And then I realized that this was Abba Shapiro, so thank you for being here. And let's see, Christy says, thanks guys, great info. Thanks again for attending, Christy, and also for sharing the event.
Yeah, thanks.
Usually two, sometimes 3 live video events every month, so.
Okay. Yeah, it's a neat way for people to acquire knowledge, because everyone has to share something, and then you can, over time, build up a lot of knowledge, very much passively, without looking for information. And sometimes it's entertaining. Obviously, this was not an approach that everyone will adopt in their day-to-day workflows, but people who are getting into portrait retouching, they will maybe struggle to get to such a point, finding it on their own. So I really hope that when people want to get into retouching, want to get into portrait beauty retouching and stuff, they will have an easier time. Not with.
Okay.
Yeah, understanding what they need to know to go there and what it takes to go there as well.
And you gave me the code, so what should I type up? Use the code PAP Live to get, what is that?
Yeah, 10%.
10%.
10%
off. And what is the exact thing? I'm going to have the link, but what do you describe it or title it as?
A satisfy script.
What script?
Satisfy.
Oh, satisfy. And that would be capital SAT, I presume.
Yeah, for a saturation.
Okay. The satisfy script, right?
Right.
Great, not satisfying. Great. Get that together. Use the code PAP Live to get 10% off this satisfy script, and I'll have that link. And
all right.
So yes, thank you so much, Daniel, and thanks everyone for attending.
Yeah. Someone said his PC has crashed. Unfortunately.
Where can we watch?
I guess you can go back and watch the video once we finished.
Yeah.
But that's a bummer. I hope you didn't miss too much.
Yeah, it's always recorded, and we post it in the groups and on the event page. So, and then I list it in a file. There is a file, so everyone knows, in the Photoshop and Lightroom group. There's a file for years and years and years of live video events and webinars. So please don't hesitate to check that out. You can be educated and entertained for days with that one.
So. For weeks and weeks, which is what people should be doing. So when you're quarantined, you can sit at home and acquire knowledge and coming out of this situation with more knowledge, which is super great.
Great. So let's see. That's Osvaldo. Thank you, guys. This was great. Yeah, thanks for being here. So thanks everyone.
Yeah, thank you
so much, Daniel. And like I said, I will be posting recording in about a minute on the event page and in the group.
Awesome.
Everyone have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, it's weekend. Oh, I have a weekend from now on. So yeah.
Enjoy.
Okay. Yeah. Great for everyone to be here, to tune in and to follow us with this.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, people.